This isn't a single episode. It's not an isolated appointment. It's not a statement uttered at a press conference. When we look at some of the decisions made in the first months of his pontificate together, a coherent picture emerges. A picture that isn't imposed with solemn declarations, but is constructed through government decisions, confirmations, promotions, and silences. It is in this interweaving that we begin to understand the profile of Leo XIV. The first sign comes from West Africa. Archbishop Bishop Gnéba, Diocesan Bishop of Man, since 2008, has been appointed Auxiliary Bishop of Abidjan. Formally, this is a new assignment. In ecclesiastical practice, however, the transition from diocesan ordinary to auxiliary is generally perceived as a downsizing. It doesn't imply the same responsibility. It doesn't imply the same autonomy. The context makes the decision even more significant. In 2024, deep tensions emerged in the Diocese of Man between the bishop and part of his presbytery. Archbishop Gnéba had issued a pastoral directive urging the faithful to report priests who were not faithful to celibacy, cohabiting with others, or involved in serious moral and financial irregularities. He spoke of shared responsibility, a duty of vigilance and consistency. He had asked that anyone who was unable to live up to their commitments should step aside. The reaction from some of the clergy was immediate. They spoke of an excessively rigid style, a lack of listening, and a distance from a more participatory model of the Church. The synodal paradigm had been evoked. At that point, the Holy See intervened, an apostolic visitor, then the appointment of an apostolic administrator sede plana. The bishop retained his title, but no longer led the diocese in administrative decisions. In September 2025, during the ordination of 7 new priests, Archbishop Gnéba was present but did not preside. A few months later, he was appointed auxiliary bishop. It's in this sequence that many observers see a signal, not a formal condemnation, but a decision that effectively closes one season and opens another. The perceived message is subtle but real. When the emphasis is strongly on internal discipline and rigorous enforcement of rules, institutional support can become more complex. This opens a first line of tension. Episcopal authority and strong government, or participatory processes and shared conflict management. The second front moves to Europe, to Malaga. Bishop José Antonio Satué, already known for his open pastoral approach to people in non-heterosexual relationships, calls the blessing of couples with a stable project a step forward. He reiterates that sacramental marriage remains between a man and a woman, but emphasizes the need to find more appropriate ways to pastorally integrate realities he defines as undeniable. In June 2025, Leo XIV promoted him to the Diocese of Malaga. Here too, there are no new doctrinal declarations. There is no formal change in teaching, yet the governance's decision speaks volumes. An episcopal profile is strengthened, favoring the language of accompaniment, inclusion, and pastoral integration. For some, it demonstrates that the Church is capable of balancing identity and mercy. For others, it signals that the practice risks assuming such weight that it redefines in the public perception the scope of the law. These aren't slogans, but rather differing ecclesial sensibilities. On the one hand, those fear a progressive slide. On the other, those see a coherent development. The third chapter concerns the Pontifical Academy for Life. During a press conference, The author asks what responsibility Catholic universities have in ensuring that their faculty fully uphold the Church's teaching on the dignity of human life, citing public positions in favor of permissive regulations on practices that affect the protection of unborn life. The response from the Academy's president, appointed by Leo XIII in May 2025, does not directly address the issue of the compatibility between academic office and public support for such regulations. We're talking about dialogue, prevention, support, ethical and social dimensions, and support for women and couples. We encourage you not to limit yourself immediately to the legal aspect. The shift in emphasis is evident. The traditional teaching on the sacredness of life is not denied, but the focus of the discussion shifts from judgment to complexity, from norm to context, from prohibition to prevention. For some, it's a more effective language in today's world. For others, it's a step backward in public clarity. Then there's the issue of institutional continuity. An analysis published on February 16th on CatholicCulture.com notes that Leo XIV, once elected, could have significantly revamped the composition of the dicastery for bishops, the body that selects candidates for the episcopate worldwide. Instead, the previously appointed members are almost entirely confirmed. 30 out of 31 remain in their positions. The only exclusion concerns a nun who is over the age limit. Not only that, Sister Simona Brambilla, who had already been chosen for a senior position years earlier, was appointed to fill a vacant post. This decision consolidates a process already underway. There is no break, no reset, no structural discontinuity. And it is here that the contrast becomes evident. On one side, there is a vision that insists on the need for regulatory clarity, internal discipline, and a clear distinction between doctrine and practice. One view fears that pastoral adaptation might generate ambiguity. On the other hand, there's a vision that favors processes, dialogue, gradualism, and inclusion, believing that identity can also be preserved through less rigid approaches. Leo XIV, in fact, seems to be positioned in the second trajectory, not with proclamations but with governing acts, not with sensational ruptures, but with targeted confirmations. It is a continuity that is built through the choice of people, the confirmation of structures, the modulation of language. For part of the Catholic world, this is a reassuring sign. Stability, coherence, the continuation of a path already charted. For another, it raises questions. Will there be room for rebalancing, for a renewed emphasis on discipline and public clarity? It's still too early to definitively define the profile of this pontificate. Church history teaches us that trajectories can be surprising. However, the first decisions point in a direction. No obvious break, no sudden change, but a gradual consolidation of an already known approach. In contemporary ecclesial debate, not just opinions are competing, but visions of the church. A church that fears losing its identity, and a church that fears losing touch with the world. A church that prioritizes the norm, and one that prioritizes the process. Leo XIV's decisions up to this point seem to lean toward the latter. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment, Amen. God bless you.